Hi everyone, it's Jerry. In August of 2010, I posted a video where I invited chess players to play a game against me on my Facebook page. How that would work exactly is I would post a photo to my Facebook wall, this right here being one of the many photos that I would post to my wall during the course of the game. I was playing the white pieces. In this instance here, I just played knight c3, and it was at that time that the members or the fans of this page would go ahead and cast their vote as to what they felt should be the next move played. They would do so by way of a comment below this photo or giving a thumbs up to someone else's comment. And in the end, the most popular move voted for was the one played. And so as the game progressed, I adjusted this game position in addition to keeping track of the game notation on the right-hand side. Some of the players who took part in this game I have listed right here. First and foremost, the names you do see are the names of those who gave me permission to include their name in this video. But not only that, they're the names of some of the players who played a large part in helping to make this game on Facebook a success in many different ways. There were literally thousands of comments made during the course of the game, and very early on, one player, or it might have been a group of players, had the idea, something that I feel was a very good idea, and that is to just initially go ahead and collaborate with one another, to just go ahead and discuss with one another what they felt should be the next best move to be played. And that worked well. We were moving at a rate of one move every 2 days, so there was adequate time for this. And just going through some of the comments that I did see during this game, it was apparent to me that I was playing against some strong players just by some of the dialogue that was being shared. And many of these players were quite helpful to one another with regard to saying why maybe a move suggested was maybe good or bad. So a great deal of good communication was most certainly going on during the course of this game, and in the end, after 4 months of play, I was the one who was having to tip over my king. So let's see how that game played out. I open up the game with d4, and the Facebook page replies knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, and bishop g7. d5 could come going into the Grunfeld, but that wasn't the most popular vote. Instead, bishop g7 was the most popular, going into a King's Indian. e4, d6, bishop e2. There's bishop to e2 as well as knight f3 from this position, or at least those are two possibilities. The bishop from e2, well, what's the difference between moving bishop e2 or knight to f3? By keeping the knight on g1, at least the queen and bishop can see directly along this diagonal, namely the squares g4 and h5, and so there's the potential at least for white to carry on with some sort of a kingside attack by way of g4, h4, g5, h5 in some order, and really just go to kill the black king very quickly. During the game, I really had no intention of going for that variation, so this bishop e2 move was just a move played to maybe give black a little bit more to consider. So as it turns out, I just play knight f3, so whether it's bishop e2, knight f3, or knight f3, bishop e2, same thing. Back on familiar turf, pawn e5, striking at my center, I castle. Knight c6, hitting my center more. Now I press forward with d5. Space gaining move, hitting the knight, chasing it back to e7, and now the current state in the center is that we're closed. And so what's going to occur next is play along the wings. So black is going to be playing f5, and ideally what white would be looking to do is maybe try and get this c5 advance in. Both of these pawn breaks, what do they ultimately do? They create open files for your rooks. They create pawn exchanges so your rooks can do stuff. So knight to e1, there's knight to e1 as well as knight d2 in this position. Both moves allow this f pawn to advance to f3 to lend support to the e4 pawn. This right here is a pawn that's going to come under fire eventually. After this knight on f6 moves, f5 is going to be played, so it's taking that into account. Instead of a knight move from this position, there is an alternative. White could go forward with what's known as the bayonet attack, signaled by this pawn to b4 advance. What does that do? First and foremost, it controls c5, and so now the advancement pawn to c5 is a possibility. But this move has to be taken, it has to be played with great care, because if you're not careful, you could maybe end up with having no play at all. Let me just give a quick example. You need to know, in other words, how exactly to react if black is to make a move like a5. If you just press forward with b5, that's no good. After b6, the queen side is now locked up, and now all the play is really just going to be on the black side, on the king side, where black is looking to play, and white is really going to be hard pressed to find any constructive plan. So you really have to be careful about locking up the queen side. We don't want that to occur for white. If a5 does come in this position, bishop a3 can be the follow-up move. And if we have an exchange on b4, white is once again in a position to press c5. If that's prevented with b6, we could have this a pawn running down to loosen up the black position a bit more, putting pressure on b6. The end result is at least more files are being created, or more open files are being created, and there's more possibilities, at least for the white pieces, to be going to the squares on the queen side. One slight variation at this point is after bishop a3, a move that could be played is b6, and if after b takes a, black could actually ignore the tension that's currently going on between the a and b pawns and carry on with their plan, which is to say get this f pawn rolling, starting first with knight h5, keeping a close eye on the sensitive point in the white position, f4, and also freeing up the pawn to move to f5. Unfortunately, there's no time to take on b6 because of the unprotected nature of the bishop on a3. So what does white do? Plays to b4 to get ready to just snip on b6. If black now goes ahead and captures on a5, the bishop's hit, so it kind of just has to go back, and now at least white is again in a position where this c5 advance could get in. So that's just a very, very quick preview with regard to the bayonet attack that's signaled by this b4 move. So we enter really just a slightly different sort of pawn structure, but you really have to know what you're doing with how exactly you're moving your pawns, that's for sure. So instead I play knight e1, and after knight d7, I play bishop to g4, which is I don't know if it's a new move. This is a move that a variation at least that I've been messing with for a little bit. I never played it seriously in tournaments, but just in blitz, I've had some mixed results with it. I've had instances where eventually, by coming to g4, these guys were exchanged off, and I was able to eliminate one of the very aggressive pieces that black has. As it turns out in this game, that didn't occur. In fact, this bishop really just turns out to haunt me in this whole game. Never really able to get rid of him, and he's really my problem piece for the whole game, I guess you'd say. There is a downside with this bishop to g4 move, and it's that there's some time that is now wasted because f5, the next move that was played, now comes with tempo. My bishop's hit. I got to back up. The reason why I'm trying to exchange off this bishop, or these two light square bishops, is because typically this bishop turns out to be very bad. If after bishop e6 or bishop e3, f5, f3, f4, just quickly showing just the clarification of the pawn structure, you'll note that this bishop is horrible and this one is awesome, because eventually there's always some possibilities for some sacrifices. Maybe if I'm going to press h3 at some point to watch over g4 a little bit, because that's eventually where black would want to make that next pawn break. There's always possibilities for the bishop just smashing open my king side. So I want to just eliminate one of the very aggressive pieces on the black side and get rid of one of my dull pieces. So that's the intention that I had with this bishop move to g4. Is it really worth it? I'm not so sure. Actually, going over this game after we were finished playing, looking over it with the computer, it's still a fairly equal position, and actually I believe close to maybe like move 24 or 25, it was still roughly an equal position. So maybe it is playable, maybe it isn't. Maybe it just needs some more testing out to determine one way or another if it's any good. So knight to f6, just really getting another piece involved, adding more pressure to e4. f3 just supporting my e4 pawn, and now c6. So I'm really just getting hit from both sides here. My center is really coming under a lot of fire by the black flank pawns. So bishop e3, controlling this diagonal. Just one quick note, c6 not only strikes at the center, but it allows this queen to jet out along the diagonal. So let's stop any potential queen checks. Exchange on d5 followed by b5. I'm ready to just kind of get pushed off the board. My center could collapse at any moment, really. If this pawn is allowed to get to b4, chase my knight away, e4 will then fall. So what do I do about that? I could have captured on b5, but I didn't give too much consideration to that because I didn't think it was worth it to give up one of my center pawns and only get a knight pawn in return. So that's essentially what would occur from that. So instead, I just make a developing move. My knight, from e1, I just kind of have to get him involved. So coming to d3 allows me to control that b4 square. And now after rook to b8, black is once again getting ready to press on the queen side. Now, typically in this opening, white is the side who should be, pushing his pawns forward on the queen side, but it's really black who's now able to kind of just push white around. And I'm getting pushed around on both the king side and the queen side. The center's locked up, and unfortunately I'm just kind of in a tough spot. So I have to make quite a bit of defensive moves. So a3 is the next one I play, preventing this advance. And after a5, once again, b4 is coming, and unfortunately I can't prevent, I don't think I could really prevent this pawn from advancing. I don't know that I want to press my own pawn forward to b4, then my knight on c3 is a bit loose. So I just kind of changed the roles here. I allowed this knight on d3 to play the role of guarding over my e4 pawn. So I move him to f2, and now he's gonna watch over e4. And I guess in some instances he's also watching over my bishop on h3. Should this pawn maybe advance to f4, I could always maybe just react to that, move my bishop out of the way, and my knight's watching over that bishop. But that really doesn't come into play in this game. Instead, what we see next, bishop d7, and now king to h1. Unfortunately for me, this is a position that I had really no constructive plan. This king to h1 move, one way to interpret it is that I had no idea what to do, and that's pretty much where I was at this point, unfortunately. I guess, getting very technical, I'm just maybe getting the king off of in a potentially exposed diagonal, but really the purpose is I just wanted to pass a move back to black and see what they're going to do. I really didn't see a way to improve my position from here. I guess I could have played queen d3, but I didn't give much consideration to it because I didn't like the idea of this bishop eventually coming to that b5 square, where from that square it'd be hitting my queen, but also there's sight of my rook. I thought actually I would end up just losing material if I did a move like that. b4, an exchange on that square, and well, actually I'd have to come to e2. Otherwise bishop would come here and win my rook for a minor piece. So I guess I could have done queen d3, but I just played king h1 in this position, and now b4 came. And I was a little bit happy to kind of see this b4 advance because at least it gives my knight, at least I end up capturing like this and then playing to a2, and at least I have pressure on one of the black pawns. At least my knight is kind of doing something, and even though it's just kind of a little bit sad being on the edge of the board on a2, and it's also blocking my rook's view along the a file, but at least it's doing something. I have some maybe plan of moving my bishop back, maybe trying to win a pawn. That's eventually what does occur. But what I was most fearful of from this position was a very just slow approach from the black side, namely the move h6. The reason I was fearful of this move is because, what do I do in the meantime? I really just came to h1 because I didn't know what to do. So if you're not going to be chasing my knight around, I really didn't see again how I could better my position. What this slight pawn move does, a couple things to point out. It frees up another square for the king to run to. If it needs to go to h7, it could go there. But not only that, it's supporting g5. And if that move comes about, then all of a sudden g4 is a possibility. And this bishop is really just causing me problem after problem. If eventually this pawn got to that g4 square, I'd end up having to capture away from the center. And as soon as I do that, black would then capture towards the center, and my center would just completely collapse. So this was a slow approach that I thought would be very, very effective. As it turns out, how the game played out, I was still in a lot of rough shape. But again, just h6 was a move that I was kind of hoping wouldn't be played. So b4 was played instead. We have the exchange followed by knight a2. And now h6 comes, and bishop to d2. So at least I have some sort of a target. I go after this pawn. And in fact, I thought at this point I was just going to be able to be winning a pawn, and I didn't see any maybe compensation for the black side. And I thought it would be actually quite good. You know, I have my bishop here. I'm eyeing that d6 square, which is going to have to be watched over by pieces maybe. But eventually I end up having to lose a piece in order to grab a couple pawns. And that happens in the following way. Queen b6 puts pressure on my knight on f2, and so eventually I calculated maybe it was okay to give up one of my minor pieces for a couple pawns. That's exactly what ends up occurring. So I end up grabbing on b4, allow this bishop b5 move, which kicks my rook away, and then my knight's going to fall. But at least I get this d6 pawn, and maybe one day I could press this pawn forward. That doesn't come into play at all, actually, in this game. So I react by just playing my rook to e1. The other choice is g1, but at least from this square I'm watching over my center. So queen takes knight, bishop takes pawn. I'm hitting the rook, hitting the knight. This rook on f8 is I'm at least pinning the knight, I should say, to this f8 rook. Rook to b7, and now e takes f. I kind of just go astray at this point. I don't know. I was considering maybe queen to b3, but I didn't like the idea of placing it opposite this rook. And actually, I wanted to make sure that my back rank was going to be safe. I didn't like the idea of bringing my queen off of the back rank. I was a little bit afraid of the capture on this square, and if I were to recapture, maybe the knight could just grab here, and I can't recapture, otherwise there's going to be mate coming by way of queen to f1. So I wanted to keep the heavy pieces on the back rank for a little bit, and I was really just wanting to actually at this point get rid of the black knights. I was very fearful of one of the black knights maybe getting to this f4 square. Typically, if you're playing the white side and your king is castled kingside, having a black knight on the f4 square is often going to cause you a headache, and I believe that in this position right here it would just be all the more problematic, because from f4 it would then have an additional target in that of just capturing my bishop on h3, and if that is ever to be allowed, my king side is completely crushed, and my king, there's absolutely no king safety for me whatsoever. So those were some of the things that I was considering at this point, and my goal was really to just get rid of the black knights at this point. And unfortunately I had to really change my mentality with the game, because I really saw no way for me to even find a win from this position. So I went for this e takes f, and I was just hoping for really a draw at this point. So I kind of just had to really just dig deep, try and salvage a draw as best I can, but the black side played very, very strong, and I didn't really see any way to make improvements in my position. I thought I was making some good moves, but the black moves were even better. So I played knight c3 again. From at this point, the knight's just one step away from getting to f4. I wanted to prevent that. I wanted to exchange off my knight, which is now not doing anything from that a2 square, so let's just get him involved. Queen b6 hits my bishop, and I just go for these knight exchanges. Another reason that I wanted the knights to be off the board is because in the ensuing endgame, what I was hoping to achieve is to have just my light square bishop versus my opponent's bishop pair. And the reason I wanted that is because I saw the potential for maybe exchanging off light square bishops and maybe also exchanging off my f-pawn for the e-pawn. And if I were able to get that in, there's possibilities for drawn endgames, because a black king, a dark square bishop, and an h-pawn is not going to be enough to win, even if I just have a king and he's able to stay in the corner. You need to have the correct color bishop in order to control the queening square. A dark square bishop is not going to be able to control h1. So these are the things I was hoping for, and actually it did occur, that sort of ending. Actually, very quickly from this point on, the major pieces go off the board. These are the moves that were played in the game. I'm just trying to get my rook involved. Eventually the rooks are off the board, and we do get this sort of bishop ending, and it's still unfortunately not enough to hold a draw, and we'll see why exactly. I play bishop d7. My pawn on b2 is, well, it's coming under fire, but I really didn't see the point of trying to hang on to him. I mean, I could only hang on to it for so long, so if I played rook d2, what to do after the rooks are doubled on the b file. Eventually, if black wants this pawn, black is going to get that pawn, so I just kind of, I'm trying to make progress with my other pieces in the meantime. If I played a b1, the bishop can always scare me away, and then the pawn on b2 is going to fall. So in the meantime, while black is grabbing this pawn, at least I'm able to get my bishop finally doing something, but it's just too little too late, unfortunately. I feel this is the best diagonal for my bishop to be on, so I just get it there, give a check, and now I'm just trying to get the rooks off the board. We have an exchange on b2 followed by rook b1, and the rooks are exchanged once again. During the game, some of the dialogue, I believe at this point, was pertaining to whether or not to keep the rooks on the board. I think it would have been a little bit more annoying to me if the rooks, if black still had a rook on the board, and well, the primary reason being because black is the side that at least has possibilities for giving me checkmate, back rank checkmates, whereas there's no back rank checkmates that I'm going to get against black. Maybe it's better to just keep me a bit more, well, I'd have to be most certainly a bit more accurate if there was still going to be a black rook on the board, but it didn't occur that way. Black is still able to just simplify the position down to this sort of endgame, and it's still going to be a win for black. I don't see any way to save a draw at this position. So after bishop to g5, I just do g3 and king e7. I was thinking that maybe I could just press forward with this f5 advance, and I'd be able to draw the position maybe, but actually that won't even help. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I were to play f4, just trying to eliminate this f pawn for the e pawn, even at the cost of one of my pawns, after this sort of exchange going on, well, actually black does best to not just capture right here. They would probably do best to give a check first, have the bishop control this light square diagonal, and only then recapture. But let's just say the bishop captures like this, and white is still even able to get this bishop on this long light square diagonal. Unfortunately for white, even in this position, there's no way to save a draw. And if you'd like to, you could actually pause the video and see if you could figure out what would be the method that black would implement from this position to go ahead and win the game. So if you'd like to pause the video, I'll just go ahead and show it now. This is essentially the approach that black would take from this position. It involves the black king just walking itself down to this f1 square, this pawn running down to h3, and then this bishop getting to g2. Did you follow all that? Let's just do a quick run through. I'm just going to move back and forth with this bishop, there's really no way that I can stop this king from eventually getting to this f2 square. My king could only stay on g2 for so long. If black really wants to, they could flush my king away from that square. The king could maybe come to e1, allow the bishop to come to f1 to give check, and then the king would eventually get to that f2 square. But eventually there would be no way to prevent the black king from getting to this f2 square, and it's actually very clear that I'm completely lost. The white side is completely lost once this black king is on that f2 square. So once after king f2, the method from here is again to just race this pawn down to h3, and unfortunately for me there's no way that I could really stop that. Bishop f1, you'll note that my king is in a complete box. All of these squares that I have highlighted are controlled by the black pieces, and my bishop, the white bishop, cannot leave this diagonal, otherwise bishop g2 would be checkmate. So what to do in the meantime? White just goes back and forth. Meanwhile, black makes progress. And the thing that I was wanting to do for pretty much the whole game, I'm able to do from this position, which is, exchange light square bishops, but it would come with a great cost at this point, unfortunately. Even though light square bishops are off the board, my king's in checkmate with a pawn. So that's one way that the game could have finished if I went for this f4 advance. So I didn't go for that route. Instead, I just went for just waiting to see what black would do. I saw that was one way black could win. I wanted to see if there was another way, and there most certainly was another way. Unfortunately for me, there's not too much excitement going on. In fact, I didn't see any way to really improve my position by way of any of my pawns advancing. In fact, I thought any pawn advance would just compromise my position. So I just shuffled my bishop back and forth from this point on for the most part. And what black did is simply make a gradual process in the following way. The king is just traveling along these dark squares, and there's really not much I could do about it, unfortunately. And at this point, after e4, we see some change in the pawn structure. What that really amounts to is that my king is going to be flushed away from this corner square. So already the possibility of even having some sort of a theoretical draw where my king is able to stay in the corner is out the door. And little by little, just these last two pawns that I have are going to be picked off in the following way. My king is just getting walked all the way up the board. My pawns, well, after bishop h3, my pawns are completely frozen, and this king just picks them off one by one. So I'm just moving my bishop back and forth. Black just has to be a little bit careful of stalemate possibilities. Really, for the most part, I was just playing out just a little bit here for instructional purposes, just to allow others who were competing in the game to see, what the method would be. I would have, in tournament play, I would have resigned a little while ago, but again, just for instructional purposes, I played out a little bit more. Bishop to e4, this is, you can't just go ahead and grab these pieces. This would, if bishop takes bishop, that would just be stalemate. So there are a little bit of tricks, or some tricks are left at this point, but again, if black is careful, that's not gonna ruin the final result of the game, which is going to be black winning. So after bishop f3, pressure on g4, I defend. And after bishop c6, there's just too many things I have to worry about. Bishop e6 to give check, or maybe, if white defends, if white were to defend at this point like this, if I defended with bishop g6, after bishop d7, this pawn is going to fall. And I can't do two things. I can't watch over this pawn and defend the bishop from getting to e8. So how the game ends up finishing is after king to g6, after king to h4, I end up resigning. And the reason I do that is because there's no way to stop bishop f3 and then losing my g4 pawn. So what I could do maybe from this point is sacrifice my bishop for the pawn, but in the resulting endgame, two bishops versus a king, that's still a win for black. I actually created a video a few years back showing one way to go ahead and win that sort of an endgame. And if you'd like to, you could literally click on any one of the 4 center squares on the board right now to go ahead and take you to that video to see how it's done if you'd like. But how the game finished up is after king to h4, I ended up resigning. So that's all for this video. So I hope you got something out of it as always, and thanks again for all of you who took part in this game. Take care. Bye.